Occasionally you come across a piece of media, be it a video game, a book, a TV show, a movie, whatever, that you don't really have any expectations for, and you go in completely blind, and you wind up loving it, and you wind up it being one of the best things you've ever seen. And that's the case with Sword Art Online. And I know it's kind of a meme. I know a lot of people really hate it because it's so popular. I know maybe the seasons after the first season aren't that good. I haven't watched the seasons past the first season because I thought the first season kind of wrapped up all the loose ends pretty well, and there really wasn't a need for a sequel. But yeah, despite the kind of the hate this show gets, I really liked it. How I pick anime to watch is there's a website that has a whole bunch of dubs because I only watch dubs because I normally watch it while I'm playing like a strategy game like EU4 or Victoria 2 or something. And I just kind of go through the list, and if a title looks interesting, I'll go look it up, and I'll make sure there's no harem or yaoi or yuri or any of that kind of stuff. And if it doesn't have any of that, then if the premise looks good, I'll try it. And I found that with Sword Art Online. I'm like, that's kind of an interesting title. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, okay, it's like a you've got virtual reality, you have fantasy elements, you have video game elements, you have romantic elements. This sounds like something I'd potentially be interested in. So I downloaded it, I started watching it, and I was hooked from the first couple episodes. I think Sword Online is brilliant, frankly, and I really enjoyed it. And this might be one of those random things I like that's kind of unpopular. Like as we've established in the past, I like the Twilight books, and I'm like the only person who will admit to liking them, particularly in this political sphere, but I digress. So let's talk a bit about Sword Art Online. So what makes Art Online so good, in my opinion, is it avoids a lot of the problems that other animes have. And actually, this is more a Kawahara thing because Excel World is very similar, and it has it's the structure is very similar. The way it avoids potential problems is very similar. So let's talk a bit about the story. So our main characters are Asuna and Kirito, if I'm pronouncing those properly. So Asuna is the heiress of a very wealthy family, and she likes to play virtual reality games. I guess perfect women exist in anime. And Kirito is I guess you'd almost call him a professional virtual reality game player because he was one of the beta testers for Sword Art Online. And he's kind of the strong, silent type, a bit of a loner, etc. And they both purchased the game Sword Art Online the day it comes out, which has been made by a famous video game maker, like in the fictional universe, one of the most famous video game makers of all time. So when they get in, he gives them all an item that makes their avatar identical to their real self. So they look exactly like their avatar. And then he activates a command in it that prevents you from jacking out, I guess the term would be if this was the Matrix or Mega Man. You're stuck in the virtual world, and until somebody beats the final boss and clears the 100 levels of the tower, nobody can leave. And if you die in the game, you die in real life. And if they try to remove the headset in real life, you also die in real life. There's like some backdoor thing programmed into it, and kind of the motivation of, I guess you can call him the villain, at least of the first half of season one, is he's like trying to make a statement that even though it's online, even though it's a video game, even though it's the virtual world, it's still real. It's still real people. The emotions are still real. The bonds we form as humans are still real, even if it is in the world of cyberspace. And I think that really comes out in this because you have normal people who are living in this fantastical world and they know it's not real, but at the same time, it really stresses the kind of the friendships that form. And that's something I really fight because there's people who are very cynical about the internet and say it's all fake, it's all just us indulging ourselves, it's separated humanity, etc. And then there's other people who say, well, it has some downsides, but it's also led to a lot of people who might not have met each other otherwise. Like I've met all you guys. I've some of my best friends now in real life best friends I met online, and then I met them later in life, and we became pals. I've gotten to talk to people all over the world. It's there's been a lot of really good things to come out of online, and sometimes people do kind of need to get away from the people in their immediate vicinity because the people around them might be really bad. Like I have a number of online friends who come from very bad family situations, and the fact that they've been able to talk to somebody else, even if it is over the internet, and they know that somebody cares about them, has helped them enormously. So it is I think an issue that's a lot more complicated than either side might give it. I agree that like the whole gamer culture thing is very toxic, but so is kind of the blind rejection of online. And I think this series does a pretty good job of balancing the two out, I suppose you could say. So they all get trapped within the virtual world of Sword Art Online. And I think the thing I like the most about this series, and this is something I like about any good romantic anime, is the canon couple is established in like the first couple episodes, and there's no harem and there's no love triangle. Which is great because I hate harem and I hate love triangle and I hate the crappy will they get together, won't they get together, they're going to have an ambiguous look at each other in the last episode. I like when there's like an on-screen relationship and we get to see it like continue to develop after they confess their feelings to each other. It's something that I think is kind of underutilized because oftentimes it's just they get together and that's the end. So I kind of like to look at how it develops over time. So obviously Kirito and Asuna get together fairly early on in the series. At first they're friends, then it becomes somewhat romantic, then they become married in game, and they adopt a AI kid who becomes their daughter, which is kind of sweet. It's a very cute series. Because it's an anime, like all the other female characters in the show are also interested in Kirito, but he's not interested in them because Asuna is his waifu, and he's going to be faithful to her, which I like a lot actually. That's always something I hate. I like I said, I just hate harem. It's in real life and in it. I like that it's established and that the main character doesn't really have any issues with cheating or being unable to commit. I think in the movie actually they do get engaged in the real world as well, which is nice because once again it's going beyond the online world. They met in the online world, but kind of the emotions they developed there were real, and then that translated into the real world. And I mean, there's been a lot of bad cases of online dating, but there's been a lot of good cases. I do know a lot of people who have had very happy marriages when they met somebody else online. And I know a lot of people who've had very bad relationships. I guess it's kind of like anything else. At the end of the day, people are people. And with all the good things and all the bad things that come along with it, whether or not they're online or not online. Um, so there's that aspect to it. So that is something I really like. The other thing I really like is there's not that many characters. There's a number of like secondary characters, but in terms of main characters, season one only has two. And then there's a couple supporting characters. It has Kirito and Asuna, and then Yui, their daughter, who's around for some of the time. And then there's like the villain and some other. But by and large, there's very few secondary characters. The only other like major secondary character is Sugu, who's Kirito's cousin, who is raised as his sister, who has a crush on him. And you might say, oh, this is going to be like a weird incest thing. But I find the show largely treats it as being like a weird disordered thing. That she kind of has a crush on him because she has low self esteem and she's kind of lonely. And Kirito in no way returns it. And he's actually, well, he's nice about it, but he's kind of disturbed by it. And she eventually kind of gets over it. So like that was like a potential minefield where they could have like a harem pairing or incest or something. But I thought it was dealt with pretty well. And I like Kirito a lot. He kind of has that. There's different types of alpha males. There's like the Chad who's really loud and brash and just goes in, etc. But there's also kind of an alpha male that's kind of a loner that doesn't really need the company of other people as much. who's just kind of, they're confident in themselves and they don't really have anything to prove to anyone anymore. Guts is a lot like that in Berserk after he kind of goes through his big arc. And you can kind of see this when he winds up leaving and beats Griffith for the last time. He's lost his youthful need to prove himself to everybody around him. He's lost his youthful need to show off. He's become a lot calm and he just doesn't have anything else he needs to prove, and he becomes a lot more serene as a result. And Kirito's a lot like that. He's an extremely hard worker and he'll kill anybody who messes with his family. But on the whole, he's fairly quiet and kind of a loner. However, he possesses immense internal strength, and he will guard his waifu and his daughter no matter what. Which I like. I like that there are still. I mean, I get that it's an anime. I get that it's an online game, etc. But I like that anime still at least hints at traditional gender roles. As I said, I think the thing to keep in mind with Japan is the idea of women fighting is just not as taboo, I think it is, as it is in Western culture. Because like in Western culture, it's a much more feminist thing to have women fighting, whereas in Japan, I think it's not necessarily a feminist thing. It's just more part of their culture, because women of the samurai caste were in many cases trained historically to use weapons, particularly naganitas. And there's a number of reasons for this. The most important one being that without chivalry and kind of Christian values, there wasn't any sort of real protection for them. Because generally in Europe, you would ransom noble captives. In Japan, I think they do that sometimes, but they more often kill them. And there was just fewer restrictions on protecting women. And like rape happened a lot in the medieval era. But my understanding is it was less bad in Europe with regards to highborn women. But women of the samurai caste couldn't expect the kind of protection they get in Europe, so they had to be able to fight. And there are famous female samurai. It's not a, it is an unusual thing, but it's not an unheard of thing. So it doesn't invert gender roles in the same way it does in North American or Western work. I hope that kind of makes sense. Um, but yeah, so the whole virtual world plot, how it gets resolved is really touching. The second half of season one, I'm not going to go into spoilers too much, but is absolutely brilliant. You really get to see Kirito as this determined figure who's going to do anything he can to protect his love. You really get to see, the whole kind of cheesy power of love, you're my soulmate kind of thing, evil trying to get in the way of love, etc. Bad guys getting their comeuppance. It's a very kind of, I think you could say, traditional, and you might even say cliche story. But kind of the final red pill is that cliches are a good thing. That things that affirm, even if it is a bit cheesy, that good defeats evil, that love always conquers, um, marital fidelity, purity, all these kind of things is actually the most base something can get. And I mean, that's horseshoe theory. It goes from it's kind of like it's neo sincerity. It goes all the way to the most cynical possible, and then you just kind of go back to square one where you were at the beginning. So I highly recommend Sword Art Online season one. At least I haven't watched beyond it because I thought the finale of season one was beautiful and it didn't really need a sequel. I get why they wanted to make a sequel and that there's more they could do with the concept, but in terms of character arcs, I think it fulfilled everyone's character arc, and I don't think there was, like I said, really a need to go on further. So that's my reaction review of Sword Art Online. Absolutely love the show. Highly recommend it, and I'll talk to you guys later.